Well, welcome to the Vitalistic Voice. I can't tell you how excited I am this morning to have my next guest with me this morning. This is Dr. Peter Amlinger, and many of you already know Peter. He's very, very well known in the chiropractic profession. He's been around for, a couple years longer than I have, actually. I'm going to say, am I correct in saying 38 years in practice? Is that right now?
This May 4th will mark my 40th anniversary.
Getting close to 40. So that is pretty darn impressive. So I know you're going to love this podcast, and we're going to get right into it. Dr. Peter, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Colin. I welcome the opportunity. I look forward to it.
Well, I'm really interested to hear because I know we've known each other for a long time, and there are some questions I have this morning. I think for my own personal selfish reasons, I'd love to know more about you and your journey, first of all, into chiropractic. How did you get inspired to become a chiropractor? And you also have a very strong philosophy. You wear that on your sleeve. I'd love to know how you developed that. Who inspired you to get there?
And awesome. And so I was truly inspired to be a chiropractor because it really started at the end of 11th grade, which would have seen me as a mediocre student making some um, questionable choices in who I was hanging around with and behaviors that I was partaking in. So I was by happenstance sitting in the guidance office of the all boys Catholic high school that I attended, while the priests were in a meeting about a certain student, and just by happenstance, I picked up CMCC's course calendar and I read the definition of chiropractic, and something inside me said, "This is what you're supposed to do with your life." And in that moment, I said, "Okay," and I just surrendered to whatever that feeling inside me was, and said, "Okay, I will." And I didn't say I will. I said, "Okay." So if anyone's familiar with the story of that something, BJ Palmer said, "I will," when he got the call. Um, and so that's how it started. Came from just a run-of-the-mill family. Father was a police officer, mom's stay-at-home mom. My sister was a nurse. We were raised in the medical model to some degree, but it wasn't what it was back then as it is now. So nobody in my family other than an uncle had seen a chiropractor, which I found about after the fact. And and so just based upon that inspired moment, I just started behaving differently. I started tuning in school, so I went from mediocre to a straight A student. Got into university, took the basically the pre-optometry program minus the physics at University of Waterloo, and um, and then uh, at some point during that process, I applied to CMCC, and I thought, they're probably going to ask me if I've ever been to a chiropractor, and I should probably be able to say yes. I don't know if that would help me these days, but back then it was an asset. So I went and to the yellow pages and found the chiropractor who was closest to the University of Waterloo, and I went to see him, and he was an awesome guy. He gave me a book on chiropractic philosophy to read, and I started getting adjusted and had some magnificent changes in my health. I didn't think I was sick, but after 6 months of care, I wasn't getting headaches anymore. I didn't need Rolaids anymore. My knee didn't buckle anymore. My vision in my right eye started normalizing and coming back. I didn't see double, like all sorts of wonderful things happened. So that's how I got into it and wandered off to CMCC, and had that philosophy book in my back pocket already, had studied the philosophy before I got to school, and was blessed to have a classmate named Becky Whitney Douglas, whose father was Dr. John Whitney. And so Dr. John took a few of us under his wing and taught us the philosophy. Don Vigiani came in, taught me some philosophy. Brett Moore was an upperclassman, so him and I just connected somehow. So I just gravitated that way. and got out in 1985, started my practice, and just became a student of philosophy.
What an amazing story. And you've brought some light to the fact that CMCC back in those days actually had some very principled, philosophically based practitioners who were there to teach students and at least gave them a sense of the philosophy. So now that we've opened up that door, what has happened in the education system to shift it to go into perhaps a different direction?
So that's a great question, and I have a bit of context because of my background in some chiropractic politics and being in some leadership, and I think so, and I drilled down on this back in the day, because I kind of thought, where did things go sideways? And I believe it has. Let me preface that by saying I believe things have went sideways, and I think some very well-intentioned things have happened in chiropractic education. I think accreditation is a wonderful thing. But unfortunately, the way accreditation evolved in chiropractic, it evolved for political reasons, not for altruistic credentialing reasons, And the fact of the matter is, we don't need chiropractic accrediting bodies. There are organizations, and all they do is accredit things. There are accrediting agencies that accredit academic programs regardless of, so we could just, work with those people and get accredited, and it would satisfy all the government requirements for loan eligibility and all of that sort of stuff. So accreditation evolved as a political thing. And I think that's where it went off the rails, if I'm honest. If you go back to the 90s when the College Association of College Presidents signed off on the paradigm statement, it's quite a principled statement when you look at it. It talks about the innate healing ability of the body. It talks about it puts forward an operational definition of the subluxation. It talks about the adjustment, and so it's rock solid. So back then, which was in the late 90s, I believe, we are okay. And then it started to go sideways after that.
Wow. So now, obviously, now I know, in your history, being in practice for such a long time, and you did get into the political arena, how has that experience shaped your thinking and your perspective on the entire profession as a whole?
So and so and I happen to study martial arts. I'm a Taekwondo artist, and so I really follow Bruce Bruce Lee's wisdom, who says we need to learn to move through life with an empty mind from a point of neutrality. And so it's taken a lot of work for me to move towards that direction. I'm not going to say I'm there, but I'm moving towards. And so I really have worked hard to try to become just an unbiased, neutral-minded observer. And and this is, I'm going to give you like a 4 hour thing I do in about 4 minutes here. So when I started looking, and so my context is president of the CCO for many years, was a peer assessor, did probably hundreds of peer assessments, and just observed the spectrum of chiropractic styles, if you will. And to preface it, I learned real fast when I went down to CCO for selfish reasons, if I'm honest. And the reason was simple. I wanted to make sure my children's children's children could get a proper chiropractic adjustment if necessary or when necessary. And so I went down there to protect um, my right to practice chiropractic the way I choose to practice it, which is within the scope of practice and hopefully way above standard. And so once I got there, I realized very quickly, if that's why I'm here, I have to, by default, I have to be okay with any other chiropractor who's practicing within the scope of practice and at or above standard. otherwise I'm a hypocrite, right? So then I just started observing, and so there's a spectrum of practice in chiropractic that I've noticed. The first, I would start at one end of the spectrum, call it the allopathic model, where it's very reductionistic, it's pain-based, it's crisis care oriented, and all these people are inspired to take care of people who are in a crisis. It's usually a back crisis, and they want to work with them till they're out of the crisis, and they see them again when they're in the next crisis. And from there we move into more of a rehab sort of model where it's the same sort of thing, but they want to work with them a little bit longer and help them to rehab and stabilize and whatnot. And then we move into what I call the mechanistic zone, where they're looking a little bit more at the neurology and the pathokinesio pathophysiology. And if I'm honest, this is where subluxation based chiropractors often fall. So it's still on the reductionistic side of things. Just like medicine has declared war on the germ, subluxation based chiropractors have declared war on the subluxation. And my observation is a lot of times they give people a lot of information about the subluxation and its damaging effects, but they forget or they underemphasize the fact that we have an innate intelligence, which is indefinitely superior. And so it tends to feel like a more fear-based um, methodology to move inspire people into care and whatnot. If Johnny's got asthma, they're like, well, we got to look where the nerves to the lungs originate from. So it's Merrick system based, right? And then from there we move into neurologically based chiropractic, which is, where our functional neurologists live, and people are looking at joint reception and mechanoreceptor input. And then we move into the um, what I would call principle-based chiropractic, where they're saying, wait a minute, there's an innate intelligence that flows from above down, inside out, and this intelligence uh, will take care of that being if it can express itself over the nervous system without interference. So it becomes focused on releasing innate intelligence and then letting innate run the show. There's another level above that, which I call creationistic chiropractic, which looks at our principle in its entirety, understanding that above, down, inside out isn't brain down, inside out, it's universal intelligence down, innate out. Right. And so now we understand that when we reconnect that person to themselves through the chiropractic adjustment, we refine their connection to the source, and that then impacts their relationship with the entire cosmos. So as Dick Santo taught me many years ago, the mission of universal intelligence is to maintain harmony and balance within the cosmos, and the mission of innate intelligence is to maintain harmony and balance within that individual with respect to their internal environment, but also with respect to all creation. And so that's a step above, right? And the fact is we all live on that spectrum. And sometimes a client will come in and we got to step down into that reductionistic side of things. Right? You sent me your brother-in-law in, and he was like, I had to go down there to try and help him out just because of where he was at, right? And so it's a beautiful, once you appreciate the spectrum, it's beautiful because we become DC becomes doctor of context, and we got to meet the person where they are, meet their needs there, and then they'll be open to the other things we have to offer them. But if we don't meet that original need, their incoming need, they won't be open to anything else we have to offer.
I love that. I've never heard it put that way before. What an articulate and eloquent way to explain that whole premise, basically from one end to the other of the spectrum. I love that, Peter. So that's really interesting because a lot of our like mutually we coach people. I know we coach other chiropractors and
Yeah.
help to establish great business skills and practice management and really develop themselves. So that's one of the things that we work with, and helping people get from the pain-based thinking where many of them have graduated from. And I was just on the phone with a young doc the other day in her first year of practice, and she's working in a WSIB clinic. And of course, I said to her, I said, that must be completely exhausting. I said, because you're working with people who are in pain all day long. She goes, you're the first person who's actually said that to me. And she goes, I can't tell you how exhausted I am with working with people who are just always, always in pain. She goes, I am
So, and
mentally drained.
yep, and when I drill down in the long version of what I just gave everybody, energetically, the X output is way higher at the reductionistic end of the spectrum than the creationistic end of the spectrum, right? I walk out of my office with more energy than I go into it after 40 years.
So you're a CMCC grad, and I'm going to ask you this question specifically, and I hope that so many young docs and docs who are in that reductionistic model in their practice can understand this. How did you make the transition in your own life and in your own mind?
So it's a great question, and I was because of my early exposure, I was already there to some degree. Um, and it's really a two-part answer. Probably the driving force behind um, everything I've accomplished in my life since the mid 80s is because of a conversation I had with a native elder. I've sat with the elders over the years, and I sat with one elder, and he paused one day. We were standing on the shore of a river, and he looked at me and he said, "Peter, never take anything I give you at face value. Go out and test it and prove it or disprove it for yourself." Very similar to BJ Palmer, who said chiropractic is either 100% right or it's entirely wrong. And I don't care what the answer is, I'm going to find it. And that's what inspired BJ from 1925 forward. So I said, so that just became my thing in life. I'm just going to go out and observe and prove or disprove stuff. It's so when it came to chiropractic, then it's like I'm gonna prove this principle right or wrong, right? It's going to reveal itself. But when it comes to the existence of God, God is either everywhere all the time or he's not. And so I'm going to go look for the presence of God everywhere and in everything, and he always shows up like he's just there. So it's proven itself to myself, right? So with chiropractic, then it's like, okay, let's study this principle and understand it. And I started reading the green books on my own. Um, I went to a couple Parkers and didn't really do the trick for me. And then in July of 1990, I went to Dynamic Essentials for the first time, and I had a nice practice then. I was out 5 years. I was seeing about 230 a week, 235 a week. Um, and I was diversified adjuster. And then I went and something happened at DE. I cried all weekend, number one. Sid grabbed my ass, number two, just, how you doing, boy? And he just goosed me in the aisle on the Thursday night and went, well, I'm not in Kansas anymore. Um, but I met Clay Thompson that weekend, sat with Clay for many hours and plugged into Thompson technique. So I changed my technique on that Monday, went back, started practicing, but something shifted inside me there. And I went back and I changed technique and ordered 3 Thompson tables, but I didn't change anything, and I didn't change what I was saying in the office. I didn't change, but I changed. And and then a few weeks later, Brett Moore took me to an Argos game, and he said, "Anything different since D?" And I'm like, "It feels like I'm busier." He goes, "Really? Like how much?" I'm like, "I don't know. I haven't looked at the numbers." Because Sid always say, get it to 500 a week and then adjust the dials, right? So I said, I'll look on Monday when I go back. It was a Friday night. So I went and I looked at the numbers, and in 3 weeks I went from 230, 235 to 450 without changing a thing. And so I phoned Brett, said like, I'm busier. He's like, how much? I'm like, I'm at 450. And he goes, well, what's different? I'm like, I don't know. And I don't want to think about it really, but if it shows up, I'll let you know. So on the Tuesday, I was driving up to a trout stream to go trout fishing, and I put in a tape, and it was Sid's talk about the friend within, and he told his cooking utensil story. And I realized that what happened at DE was the principle dropped from here, where I knew it academically, into my heart space. And now it became part of me. And so the vibration was different, and that was the shift. And so then I just really fell into the green books and digested them and internalized them. And I just went out and said, I'm looking for the presence of universal intelligence everywhere. I'm looking for the expression of innate intelligence in all living things. And that's just become the lens through which I view life now. And it's just constantly proven itself over and over and over and over again.
Isn't that what happens? And I'm sure that you've seen this with your coaching clients, and I know I've seen this many, many times with coaching clients, is that when chiropractors grow, when they finally change something in themselves or something changes in themselves, their practice doesn't grow, just by a few visits. It doubles or it triples. Like something happens, Matt, and within a few weeks or months, all of a
Yeah.
sudden you see double the numbers.
It's always a quantum leap. And Sigafus would attest to that as well. That was his experience. And what we're doing really is lining people up with their authentic self, right? And so and so at the end of the day, if we could strip all the programming away from everybody on the planet, not just chiropractors, we would be left with the knowing that we are an innate intelligence, right? And that our physical body is an expression of that intelligence, as is our mind, as is our personality. And so when we strip it all down, that's who we are. And when we start to just be that person and let it guide everything in our life, that's where the transformation happens, right? So it's about stripping away all the programming that's been plastered on, um, which BJ wrote throughout the Green Books and whatnot, and then getting in touch with our innate personality, the spiritual gifts that we have been blessed with, and then it just becomes a process of mastering those gifts and then sharing them with humanity.
Well, and you used the term before we started today, you used the term vitalistic, and I think, and I want to quote what you said. You said vitalistic has become anemic in our profession. Can you
So,
describe?
well, what I studied your questions, or just reviewed them, and you mentioned vitalistic, and to me, I feel like vitalistic chiropractic is an anemic term when it's put up against our principle. And so I sat with that and I went, well, he's probably going to want to know more about that. So I'm a bit of a word geek, and I didn't go all the way back, but I looked up the definitions of a few things, such as vitalism. So the dictionary definition of vitalism is the theory that the origin and phenomena of life are dependent upon a principle distinct from purely chemical or physical forces. To me, that's kind of, beige. Vitalistic, a doctrine that the functions of a living organism or the functions of a living organism are due to a vital principle distinct from physical or physiochemical forces, that life is not explained in physics and chemistry alone, and that life is somehow self-determining. Anemic. Right? Because that would because that doesn't that would mean your life is self-determining, my life is self-determining, amoeba's life is self-determining, but doesn't connect it all together. Vitalistic chiropractic. Urban Dictionary definition, a preventative type of medicine that seeks to heal the entire body by allowing the nervous system to communicate without disruption by removing blockages. Well, that just makes me want to throw up in my mouth, if I'm honest, even though I'm that guy with the neutral mind. That, like, we're not a type of medicine. We're not an alternative to medicine. We're a separate and distinct healing art that's based upon a principle. So, so when we go back to our major premise, if we put these definitions up against this statement, there is a universal intelligence in all matter that constantly gives it its properties and characteristics, thus maintaining it in existence. That's sexy. These are anemic, right? If we drill down and we go to Article 49 in Stevenson's chiropractic textbook, the first step of the universal complete cycle, it defines universal intelligence. It's an intelligence that has existed always. It's indefinitely superior. It's infinite. Having these qualities means it's very intelligent. Being very intelligent means it's never made a mistake. Having never made a mistake means it always works for the highest good. Having these qualities makes it God. See Webster's dictionary for a definition of God, which always makes me chuckle. So, and I'm paraphrasing it a bit, but that's what we're working with, right? That's the intelligent energy that maintains harmony and balance within the cosmos. And universal intelligence is not destructive. Universal forces are. That's different, right? So then when we read further down in Article 49, it says, this intelligence is infinite. Our perception of it is limited. We can only expand our awareness of it through experience. And so that informs the wisdom that Art, the elder, gave me when he said, don't take it at face value. Go out and observe it everywhere, prove it or disprove it, right? Then goes on to say living things are endowed with a subunit of universal intelligence, separate from, yet not separate from, called innate intelligence. And innate intelligence has all the properties and characteristics of universal. And its mission is to maintain the organism in which it lives in a state of active organization. And that's what we work with, right? It's bigger than the nervous system. It doesn't need a nervous system. It built our nervous system because as we accumulated cells and became more complex, it needed to develop a communication system, right? But we're not the nervous system. We're not in chiropractic. We're not the vagus nerve. We're not the nervous system. We're not this theory. We're not this theory. We are helping this innate intelligence express itself in that individual. And as D.D. Palmer said, when he dedicated the Chiropractic Adjuster, he said, I dedicate this book mostly to those men and women who are preparing humankind for the next phase of their metaphysical existence. So vital, it just limits our principle, and does short changes it, and so we have to be very careful that we never minimize the principle,
Pete,
right?
I love this. I love this. But first of all, I just want to say I love talking about philosophy, but you have such an articulate way of describing it and making it come to life. But I want to know, and I'm sure a lot of viewers want to know, if they want to progress into a vitalistic style of practice, for lack of a better term, or a principled style of practice to have more of a philosophical foundation in what they deliver in their practice. How did you transition to that? In other words, how did you start to educate your patients and put systems in your office to deliver a principled style of practice in your clinic?
I started telling the truth in a nutshell, right? And I would say I took procedures out of my office. I stripped them down. And in a lot of my mentoring work, I'm stripping it down a lot because it muddies the water. And so as an example, I remember I was doing a report of findings with this. So if you walk in my office, you're not going to see subluxation degeneration charts. You'd be hard. We have a chart of effects. It's in the X-ray room. I used to have, subluxation kills up on the wall with the Sigafus poster with the noose and stuff. And I'm like, that's a little harsh. My brother hung himself, so it was hard for me to look at that. So, so literally, I started telling the truth, and it happened as an example. I was given this report of findings back when I did have the subluxation degeneration charts, and the person I was given the report to is a very intelligent lady who did sales training. And so I'm going through the phases and stuff, and I'm leaning in, and then Innate gave me these words, and I'm leaning in, looking her right in the eye, and I go, Jessica? She goes, yes, you're a British lady. I go, everything I just told you is a lie. And I'm like, and she goes, yes, I know. And I'm like, oh, well, now what do you want me to say, right? And then this came through. Is what I want to tell you is everything in life is a process, and health is no different. We either moving towards a higher expression of life or we're moving away from it. And what's important is the direction that you're moving in. Doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum. My job is to keep you moving in the right direction. Are you good with that? She says, absolutely, I'm all in. And that became my report of findings. She brought her husband in, her son in. They stayed under care for 15 years till they moved back to the UK. And so, so I just started letting my Innate run the show, and I was back in the day, Joe Stuckey counsel, I said that the four keys to a massive practice are tell the story, deliver the goods, do it at a price families can afford to pay, and let Innate run the show. And so that is the answer. So I just started telling the truth, and then and it just kept evolving. And here's the thing, and this is where people get stuck. I had a mentoring client once, and he was full of ego. He thought he had it all figured out, claimed he was bored in practice. And I'm like, how working with this principle, how could you ever be bored? Like adjusting a person and watching life come back into him, how could that ever become boring? But he had this management guy. He was a coach for his management guy, and he had been doing it for 11 or 12 years. So our first call, and he shows up on the call, happens to be Italian. He's got this white dressing robe on. It's early in the morning. I'm like, oh my man, like I hope you got something on underneath that. But so I start drilling down, like, so you're bored? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, so let me ask you something. Do you do a doctor's report? Yes, I do. What's it look like? Well, it's the one my management guy taught me. Been doing it for 12 years. Have you ever changed it? No. He was still using those slide carousels that, with the so like one evolution above the old film strip thing, if you're old enough to remember those. I'm
I
probably
started
really
I started with overheads.
there you go. So I'm like, so you've never changed your class? He said never. How about the poster? Never. I'm like, okay, I have a question for you. Has your appreciation of our principle changed since you started practice? He
Boom.
goes, of course it has. I said, is your doctor's report an accurate reflection of your current appreciation of the principle? Absolutely not. When's your next doctor's report? Tonight. And it was like an hour and something long, right? I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Tonight, no film strips, nothing. Just get up, speak from your heart, make sure it's less than half an hour. Let me know how it goes. The next morning, I get an email. 25 minutes, right from my heart. Best class I ever gave. Everyone signed up. I love this thing, right? So, so the thing is, our principle's infinite. And so our appreciation of it is going to expand over time. It's going to evolve over time. And our office and everything in it has to be a reflection of our current appreciation of the principle. So as an example, during the pandemic, we were at my wife's parents for dinner, Tracy's parents for dinner. And I just made the comment, the clinic's looking really tired. I need to spruce it up. And my mom, who is 70, mom-in-law, 75 at the time, says, well, I could paint the clinic. And she's a tiny little thing like Tracy, and Tracy's like two artificial knees. And Tracy goes, Mom, it's a huge space. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've looked after her for nothing all these years. It's the least she could do, right? And so she went in during the pandemic and she painted the entire clinic. And in that process, we had to take everything off the walls, obviously, right? So just by happenstance, we had a staff meeting and I turned to my 1CA and I said, what do we do in this office, Kath? And she said, we help families optimize their expression of life. And I went, write that down. So we captured it, right? And we got a mission statement printed up. Our mission to detect, analyze, and correct subluxations in families to optimize their expression of life. And it went up on the wall in the reception area as a reminder to us, right? Everything in the office. So we took inventory, and it's like if there's anything that doesn't absolutely resonate with that statement, it's not going back up on the wall. And so if you walked into my office today and looked at that, everything you would see on the wall is a direct reflection of that statement. And our procedures are a reflection of that, our communication to people. So it's completely congruent with our value system and our mission, right? And that's evolved over the years, right? And I actually think that this might be it. Like, I don't know that I could refine or improve on that anymore for a mission statement in a chiropractic office, right? So the advice is you have to take inventory, right? If we go and so that whole thing about from reductionistic to creationistic, a lot of people want to be here, principled and creationistic. But if they paused and took inventory and looked at their communication with their patients, their posters, their forms, it's down here in the reductionistic area, so it's not congruent.
Yeah.
So you got to move them along, right, and bring everything together.
That is one of the things that I've said for a long time, and I love the word congruency, and I use it. I think I overuse it. However, you're right. It does come from your belief system, your core values, and then the way you deliver those core values. And I believe this is so pertinent to chiropractic to be able to deliver your core values in a congruent system. So I want to ask you, from a technique standpoint, how is your technique congruent with your philosophy?
So I'm an upper cervically focused full spine chiropractor. I do so, and so I've developed a protocol over the years that is we've proven it's teachable and reproducible if people study it. And it, so I look at the nervous system as and spine as an integrated circuit. And so I think a lot of people talk about subluxation, subluxation, subluxation. There's a difference between a subluxation and a person being subluxated. Being subluxated is, in my mind, a physiological state. And so it doesn't matter if one bone, to simplify, and I do believe we need to create a modern operational definition of subluxation and adjustment. I think we've learned more and we could probably do better. and communicate it to the world in a way that they would understand it. So I know that if your atlas is subluxated, your entire being is subluxated. You are less than 100% light, right? As we like to talk about. So it doesn't matter whether it's one bone or two bones or three bones that are subluxated. My job is to look at that person as a whole, to see them whole on the table, and to check the integrity of their spine and nervous system, because that's the vehicle through which innate expresses itself in complex beings like ourselves. And so I don't look at symptoms. I look at patterns of interference. I find out where the interference is through my protocol. I remove it, and then I'm done. Right? So like Gonstead, everyone thinks Gonstead said find it, fix it, leave it alone. Gonstead said find it, accept it where you find it, fix it, and leave it alone. That's huge, right? So as an example, back when I got my Thompson tables, my guy came in and he used to get cluster migraines, and he came in and his head was banging, and I put him on the table and I check him, and he's a negative Deerfield, so his pelvis is subluxated, and I adjust his pelvis and his legs are perfectly balanced, and I'm like, okay, you're good. It was a Monday. I'm like, you're good. See you Wednesday. And he's like, I have a cluster head. I'm like, you're clear. You're good. See you Wednesday. And I walked out of the room into the next room. And through the window in that room, I watched him walking to his car, and I went, even walking out of the room, I went, yeah, he's pissed. He's not coming back. Right. And then I watched him walk into his car, and I went, he's really pissed. He's not coming back. And so I went on with my day. Wednesday morning, he's back in. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, I left here. I was pissed at you. And I'm like, you were really pissed. He's like, I wasn't coming back. I'm like, I know that. He said, by the time I got to my car, I couldn't believe how much better I felt. Proved itself, right? And and so I've just come and proven it over and over again to myself that once they're clear, they're clear. And if you try to do more to try and satisfy their symptomatic need at that point in time, you're going to mess it up,
Right.
you know. And
Right.
so people often say, I was going to tell you, but I just didn't. I'm like, and so I will say to my people and meaning it, I think we do better work when we don't know what you're experiencing right now. Having said that, do I let people talk? Same coaching client with the doctor's report. He came to observe me, and I'm driving him back to his hotel room, and he's like, "You're really interested." I'm like, "Why is that?" He goes, "You actually let your people talk about symptoms." I'm like, "Well, they're not. It's not symptoms. They're telling me about their life. It's their story." So it's important we let them talk about their symptoms, and then we need to take it further and say, okay, that's your story. How's it impacting your life? What can you not do that you'd love to be doing? Right? So he goes, you let them all talk, but then you say the same thing every time. And then I go here and I'm like, do I really want to know? Because if I know, I'll start screwing it up. And I'm like, oh, really? Well, what's that? He goes, they tell you what they need to tell you. And then you nod your head and you say, okay, let's check you. So the thing is, my patients know what's going to happen after they tell me about their symptoms. If they have something to report that day, they're going to get checked. And I, I hear it, I release it, and then I just check them and I adjust them wherever the subluxation is that day to clear the subluxated state of being, to bring them back into unity with their innate and with universal.
And so let me ask you then, so in a course of care of somebody who's coming in regularly in your office, and I know you use your Thompson technique, so you're constantly checking leg lengths on a daily visit if you do. Is there a time where you would actually do a progress exam or a reevaluation with that person? And are there specific testing protocols that you use to monitor?
Yep, 100%. And I and and that's an evolution as well, because if I've learned one thing in 40 years, it's that everyone responds differently, right? And so I'm checking the integrity of their nervous system. And so my main checks are, I do a thermal scan on the neck, I do pattern analysis, so I scan the neck every visit. I look at posture and I look at leg balance. And then one of my other outcome measures on initial exam and progress exams is heart rate variability. And then I will check range of motion, for example, and I'll do when indicated certain orthopedic or neurological tests, because we want to be clinically sound, right? And people come and observe me and they're like, your clinical skills are really good. I'm like, well, I have a responsibility, and I will say, if you're in a leadership position, you have a huge responsibility to the principled community, because you got a target on your back, and we've all seen my mug on the front of the paper. So you got a target on your back. There's no doubt about it, right? Um, and they like to shoot you in the back too. They don't like to look you in the eye, I can tell you. So so we do but from a chiropractic perspective, it's thermal scan, posture, leg check, heart rate variability, and that guides. So and so I used to be really rigid in my care plans. And so my outcome measures are to clear the graft, to neutralize posture, to balance the legs, and to improve coherence, right? So I'm not saying it's not relevant. I don't look at changes on X-ray, right? Because in my world, in my model, if your scan's clear, your legs are balanced, your posture's neutral, and you're in coherence, innate's flowing, right? And so I want to be very clear. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's my protocol. Those are my outcome
Yeah,
measures.
well, you're a perfect example of somebody who can build a very high volume practice that is not X-ray dependent.
Yeah. And so so now my current communication is, I've been doing it for 40 years. I've learned everyone responds differently. I'm going to throw the worst case scenario at you. And if you get better quicker than that, better from a chiropractic perspective, it's going to make me look really good. That's right? But in reality, it's always inspiring to beat a goal. So, I might start checking them 3 times a week for 6 or 8 weeks. But if after 4 weeks they're coming in and their graph's clear and their legs are balancing out, it's like, you know what? You're ahead of schedule. Let's do a progress evaluation and see where you're at, and let your innate through your physiology tell me where we're at.
And I
And so,
think this is so vital, Pete, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really want to make this point clear because there's going to be viewers that are watching this, and I know many of our coaching clients are watching this, young docs, new graduate students. You just basically said it that you're not decreasing the person's level of care or their frequency of care based on the fact they're feeling better. You're doing some level of objective measurement to say you are clear, your nerves are clear, your spine and nervous system is improving, your posture's improved. Now we can decrease the frequency of your care, not because your headaches are gone or not gone.
correct. And I significantly reduce frequency before they're feeling better, right? And it's like, so in very simplistic terms, and some people get at me for and I say it to the patients in very simplistic terms. Here, we have to get the bone off the nerve. Then the nerve needs time to heal. Once the nerve pathway, because so my current operational definition of a subluxation is altered spinal function that results in aberrant patterns in the nervous system. So we're dealing with bad habits in the nervous system, right? So we have to move the bone off the nerve. That nerve pathway needs to heal up. Then the tissue that lives at the end of that nerve needs time to heal up. And as that starts to happen, you'll start to notice the change, right? As that's happening, you might feel worse. You will feel different. You might perceive it as better. You might perceive it as worse. It's just your body changing and comprehending itself and rebuilding itself. And people get that. And we know what we're doing. And when I teach my upper cervical, my protocol, we talk a lot about fluid dynamics and mechanoreceptor input and all of those important things because they're huge and they're fun and they're a fantastic example of how incredible this intelligence is when it can, and for me, when I look at chiropractic education, you spend the first 2 years learning what happens when people are living subluxated. And then you spend the next two learning how to figure it out and hopefully, correct the situation so they can start to move back into functioning the way they're designed to, right? So I'm quite aware of all that stuff, but we have to put it forward to people in a way they can understand it.
Right. And clearly you've worked on your ability and your skills to communicate with people in a way that they can understand it. And so would you agree that in our school system, our education system, and this is going to be a nice diversion into that topic, would it be valuable to set up courses or part of the curriculum to teach young chiropractors how to communicate to their patients in a different way or different perspective?
I think it should be, I mean, it should be part of the core curriculum for sure. And I will say I have an associate in my office who's a New Zealand grad, and her ability to communicate principle is good, and like I'm impressed with it. And her adjusting skills are very good as well for somebody like probably the best adjuster straight out of school that I've met in 40 years. So that gives me hope. But in many schools, even schools that consider themselves principled, they don't prepare uh, the students to for the realities of practice and building a practice and whatnot. And I mean, my observation is that a lot of people graduating today think they can, make an Instagram post. I just found out I had an Instagram account, Colin, and it was last posted on 2016, and I didn't even know the password, so somebody did it for me. So, but they think that they can build a practice through social media, and maybe you can, but I'm going to tell everyone that the way you build a practice is by building relationships. And the only thing that's important in life is relationships. So, you know, I built my practice by doing a doctor's report, by writing a weekly thought for the week, teaching my community about the principle through the word, through written word, and I was involved in minor hockey. I was a hockey coach, and that was my community involvement, and I built relationships in that community, and and that was it. And I believe that model would still work today. Yeah,
Yeah.
and probably, and so that's all I have to say about that.
So I want to open this door because I know we have a common congruent mission here. And I know one of my missions is I want to see another chiropractic school planted in Canada. That's really a
Yeah.
big picture vision with myself. And I know that's one of your missions. So first of all, tell me how did that start? And just talk a little bit about the progress and where that's going.
Well, and it started probably, Lord knows how many years ago, Tom Preston and I having a conversation about that. And then in the early days of D in the night, we've always talked about it as long as I can remember, but nobody ever really did anything about it. So four of us have, and we've incorporated the name and we've gotten ministerial consent to proceed, which you need to do before you can incorporate the name. And we've got a lot of the base, the foundational stuff done. Um, and we we're going down one pathway with an organization that looked promising until it didn't, which is okay because that's how innate builds stuff, right? And you learn each step of the way. So we now have applied for our charitable status, and once we get that, um, we can start building a war chest and collecting funds and giving tax receipts and whatnot. And then we've got a couple of ideas in the pipeline that we can pursue. We've had some talks and have a couple of plans which we've been advised to keep kind of quiet right now. Um, so we have a game plan in place. And I would say that, and we need to follow up because our application's been in long enough. Even our government should have done something with it by now. Um, so we'll follow that up. But as soon as that happens, there's a possibility that things could move relatively quickly, and we could see something within a couple of years if that
That's
opportunity plays out. So the options are, you build something from scratch, which takes multiple millions of dollars in at least a decade. Two is you partner with an existing organization, which we tried to do, but that just um, the visionary in the organization was all in, but they kind of didn't tell the administrative side what they were up to. And when we had our first meeting with that group, they were like, we know nothing about this. We don't have the bandwidth to do it. We can't do it. We can't even think about taking this on. So that was fine. And then other opportunity showed up that we're investigating, which allows us to piggyback on the efforts of others and sort of import a program. So that's all I can say, it all hinges on us getting that charitable piece in place.
right. Right. Well, that's very exciting. And have you at this point, because I know in our past conversations we've discussed just the opportunities for different locations. Are you at liberty to talk about potential locations for a new school?
Well, so one of the piece of advice we got from an existing college president was do a survey because you might think it's all about the student experience. So we could pick a great place, but it might not be appealing, and it's one of the factors, and it should be a factor. So we're thinking of, so we've done a survey and we've disseminated it to some degree if so we want to target potential students, current students and recent grads to get their feedback about that. So if you have a pipeline to help us with that, we could get the survey to you to collect some data. Um, so we want to make sure it's in a center that is good for students, which means there's an opportunity for them to get a job, a part-time job if they want to have a job. There's a social scene that's appealing to students. There's nature close by. There's recreational facilities. So those are some of the things that we think are important. We're thinking probably a smaller community rather than a massive big urban area and whatnot. Um, so those are some of the things on our checklist. Um, and so I think, a smaller town and there's a smaller town like a Guelph, for example. I think Guelph, just as an example, nobody, it's just an example. Let me say it again. I think Guelph would be a perfect, like we know it's got a vibrant student community with the University of Guelph there. There's nature close by. There's a social scene. It's close to an airport. So those are sort of the things we're looking at.
Wow. Well, that's very exciting. That's very exciting. So yeah, absolutely, we need to connect on that. And as far as the survey goes, absolutely, I can help you with that. So, Peter, obviously we're approaching the hour here. So, I want to give you the opportunity. Any final thoughts? I know Tracy's waiting for some breakfast. So, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Just I'm here to help if you need me, number one. Colin can get in my contact info. Um, but this principle is a living principle. And so we have to be the principle. and in being the principle, it's a becoming because it's an infinite principle, so you're never done. And I talk to a lot of clients and I coach, I don't coach, I mentor young athletes in my practice about the mental side of things. And a lot of people get trapped up in the illusion of perfectionism. And there's no such thing as perfect. I just graded for my third degree black belt and and it was far from perfect. I had an off day actually, if I'm honest, and I had talked about this in the essay I had, the video essay they had me do, and it's like the hope is to put in effort every day and become a little bit better than you were the day before. And sometimes the process of getting better means having a day that really sucks because that's where you learn the most. When I coached hockey, it's like we'll learn more from our losses than we will from our wins. So so we have to let go of the illusion of perfect. There's no such thing as perfect in life. And perfect implies an endpoint, and we're dealing with an infinite principle. Um, and so let go of the concept of perfectionism and grasp onto the path of mastery, where you're just trying to improve and improve and improve. And my observation is we need more masters in chiropractic, masters of the philosophy, masters of the communication of the principle, masters of technique. Really find techniques that you love and incorporate them and tie them together, which is, what I've done. And I hear all the time about my level of technique mastery. It's simply because I put the effort in intentionally and with awareness, right? So move forward intentionally and with awareness, congruent with your values, constantly be taking inventory. Immerse yourself in the chiropractic community, get involved with your group. It's great you have a community. We are so grateful that your community's coming to Pure and Powerful. And we need to build that. When you graduated, we graduated into a family. And that was kind of dissolved for whatever reason. And I know you're trying to build it up and we're trying to build it up. And it's great that we're working together on it.
It's fantastic. I remember the author John Maxwell says, "Some days you win and some days you learn." So,
Yep.
Peter, you're a perfect example of that, and I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, that was one of my notes here that I wanted to say is that for people to get in touch and immerse themselves with you and with your energy, pureandpowerful.com.
You got it.
On pureandpowerful.com and see the schedule of events. I know you've got an event coming up in February down in the Caribbean.
Yeah. In
So,
Mexico.
yep.
Yeah.
What a great way to spend some deep philosophical time with a core
The,
bunch of principled chiropractors. That's a great opportunity.
yeah. And we're excited about that because it's gonna be one day of hardcore philosophy and talks, but then it's going to be experiential because you know, remember in Stevenson's, it says it's infinite. Our perception of it's limited. We can only expand our awareness of it through experience. So I love doing experiential work with people.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Dr. Peter Amlinger, I can't thank you enough for being with us today. This has got to be one of the most enlightening interviews I've ever done. So I truly appreciate your insight. I love your energy, and I know our viewers would definitely feel the same. So, Pete, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Colin. We for no good reason, and just because we were both doing our own thing, we didn't see each other for many years. So it's really great that we're sharing space again. I'm really grateful for that.
And likewise, thank you.